Hello, everybody. Good afternoon on this Friday. Hope you guys are doing well. And it's time for one last video in this little series I've been doing this week where we look at potential opponents for the Seahawks in the divisional round. We've talked about the three other teams that it could be. So the only team left is the 7-seeded Green Bay Packers. So the Green Bay Packers, 9-7-1. They actually had the tie this year, and they find themselves in a position where it's actually very likely. In fact, I would say right about 50% likely that they are the Seahawks opponent in the divisional round because only one thing has to happen for Green Bay to be the opponent. Green Bay has to win their game against the Bears. So because of that, I would say this is probably the most interesting one to talk about, also because this is the one team that we haven't played already this year. All right, everybody, before we go any further into the video, I want to take a minute to tell you guys about a wonderful app called Sleeper, a one-stop shop for all your sports needs. You can celebrate and chat about sports in real time with other users. You can get all kinds of scores, sports news, and sports alerts with blazing fast speed. And of course, you can play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. So enjoy sports with other people in a community. Download the Sleeper app today and remember to use the promo code SBN, that is SBN, for up to $100 match on your first deposit. And they also have a free $20 entry right now, no deposit required. So pair those two up. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states and growing. Check out the Sleeper app and have fun with sports this year. All right, so the 2025 Packers are a little bit of a tough team to talk about because they started their season off quite strong. They were looking quite good, and then they lost almost certainly their best player to injury, and he's not going to be back this year. And that obviously completely changes everything you have to consider when thinking about the Packers. So understand that we're going to talk about their season as a whole, but keep in mind that the last four games are the thing you really should be looking at with Green Bay right now because that is when they lost their best player. And you guys know I'm talking about Micah Parsons. There's really no recovering from the loss of Micah. Green Bay has been very, very, very pass rush deprived, even for a little while they had him, and they definitely have a big problem now that they don't have him. So let's talk a little bit about the Packers, why we might want to play them. So I think the most obvious glaring reason why the Seahawks should be excited to play the Packers, if that is the matchup, and again, I want to stress this is the most likely matchup by far, is they're playing their worst football right now. If you go to their schedule and you look at the last four games, and I did say those four games are the games that are really worth looking at because they're the games that they played either partially or entirely without Micah Parsons. They're on a four-game losing streak. Now, let's be totally fair here. They lost to Denver, which is a respectable loss. Denver, especially in Denver, very good. There's nothing wrong with losing to Denver. They lost to the Bears in a very fluky game. They only lost this game because they didn't recover an onside kick. Realistically, they actually played very well in that game without Micah Parsons to keep a very good Bears offense to a very, very small point total. I think it was like 9 points before the onside kick. So if you want to take that into consideration here, it's like, actually, they found a way to get some really good stuff done. It's the Ravens game that really looms large here. That was a really embarrassing showing by them defensively. They got a great game from their backup quarterback. Malik Willis actually did some really impressive stuff in that game, and it didn't matter because they had no ability to stop the run, even though Baltimore was playing Tyler Huntley at quarterback. So that's kind of the game that you're really looking at if you're trying to evaluate this Packers team, where they are right now and what they are without Parsons. And then, of course, the Vikings game, that one, they didn't even try to win. I don't think they played much of anybody. The players they did play that are actually impactful to them didn't play that much, or they are still guys kind of far down the chain. So I'm not really thinking about that game all that much, but to end the season on a 4-game losing streak, it does speak to that team really limping into the final gate here. And without getting too much into just looking at the end result here, even if you don't want to take this slate of losses all that seriously yet, like I said, this Packers team has no pass rush, and their struggles here actually predate the Micah Parsons injury. If you go back to the Minnesota game and all the way through to the end of the year, the first Minnesota game, this Packers team has 1 sack combined over their last 7 games. So even with Parsons, they were not getting to the quarterback, and now without him, they really don't. They don't have another guy they can really trust to get in there. Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, those guys are not really stepping up. And without those two guys stepping up, there's not really too much else this team can do. So I think that's just the main reason. They're playing their worst football at the worst possible time, with the possible exception of back in early November when they lost back-to-back games to the Panthers and Eagles at home. I feel like this is probably the worst that Green Bay has played all year, and it's hard to beat a 4-game losing streak. Now, obviously, if we play them, that means they beat the Bears, but there are a lot of extenuating factors to consider in that game. And I don't think Green Bay beating the Bears, if they do, will necessarily mean that, oh, that Packers team has figured it all out and they're good to go. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is just the injury situation, which I already discussed. They're missing their best player. He's not coming back. His career might have been altered irrevocably by that injury, by the way. So really, really rough stuff there. And they have no means by which to replace him, and they have no means by which they can really mitigate that loss. It's just something that has completely taken their defense out of sorts. And they do have some other injuries going on here. Zach Tom is questionable for this game. Jordan Love's obviously dealing with some stuff. I'm sure he's going to play this weekend, but he's gotten dinged up a couple times this year. If he gets dinged up against the Bears and then the Packers win anyway, maybe you're dealing with injured Malik Willis in that divisional round game. Maybe you're dealing with an injured Jordan Love in that game if he ends up playing through it. They got a couple other things going on as well. Really, we have to get through that Bears game to see where exactly they're going to be here. But it also kind of doesn't matter because Micah Parsons is out, and that guy is so important, so valuable, so impactful that there's just not going to be any replacing him. And this Packers team is going to be very injured regardless of anything else. So that to me is reason number two why you'd want to play this Green Bay team. And reason number three would just be the makeup of that roster, I think suits a matchup against the Seahawks pretty well, where they don't really have a true number one wide receiver. They have a collection of guys that are pretty decent, that are guys that they like, but I don't feel like any of these guys in their wide receiver core are anywhere close to being stars. Like Christian Watson's listed as their number one, I guess, and that's probably the case, but he hasn't broken out into becoming a full-time stud yet. Romeo Dobbs is okay. Jaden Reed is okay. Matthew Golden is very talented, but his rookie year has been pretty disappointing. Dontavion Wicks. They kind of have this collection of B-level wide receivers, and I don't see anybody here that really strikes a lot of fear into me as a Seahawks fan. And Josh Jacobs has kind of come back to earth this year. He's been a lot less effective than he was last year. So they don't really have that overwhelming playmaker on offense that makes me go, I don't know if we're going to be able to stop that guy. They don't have and I say this even knowing that he's old and he's worn out, but Christian McCaffrey type guy or a Puka Nakua type guy. So when I look at that, I see a team that is very dependent on out scheming you and getting a great game plan from their coaching staff. And if they can't win there, it's hard for them to win on pure talent. Okay, so one reason that I would say is kind of it can cut both ways on whether or not you'd want to play Green Bay in the playoffs would be just how unbelievably inconsistent they have been. To me, the thing that defines this Green Bay Packer team in 2025 more than anything else was just their complete inconsistency. They were a team that could show up and put up 40 points on Dallas, 35 points on Pittsburgh, and then they would put up 7 points against Philadelphia, 13 points at home against Carolina. You look at even the most recent set of games, they put up 26 points on the road against Denver, which is really good. Denver has one of the best defenses in football. And then they go to Chicago, one of the worst defenses in football that most teams have been lighting up, and they put up 16 points. Now, obviously, Love got hurt in that game, but still, you would expect a lot better from a really good offense in a game like that. You have games against the Baltimore Ravens where they give up over 40 points to a backup quarterback. And then the previous week, they're giving up barely anything to a really good Bears offense. They're just really inconsistent. And I think for the most part, that's encouraging because Seattle, especially defensively, is so much better than the average team. They can probably get one of the low, low production outcomes out of that Green Bay offense. But in fairness, we've seen them blow up and have big games before. They put up 40 points on Dallas. Not that that's the most impressive thing in the world, but that we've seen them have big games offensively. You can look at this schedule, 31 points on Detroit. So they are capable of putting up those big numbers. And the one thing about Green Bay, they're just kind of unpredictable. They're an unpredictable team in 2025. And I think that might carry over a little bit, even without Parsons. Like over the last 4 weeks, forget about the Minnesota game for a second. I feel like you've seen such a wide range of outcomes here. It's a little bit hard to pin down. So that would be reason number one. Well, that would be a reason for and against wanting to play Green Bay, I guess I would say. You go over to the depth chart again, though. One reason why I would say maybe you wouldn't want to play Green Bay, and this is something that I've talked about a lot with some of these other playoff teams. Look at the level of experience they have in the postseason. Most of these guys have played in at least a couple of playoff games. Jordan Love has a little bit of playoff experience. He has a playoff win. So it's not going to be a team that is completely lost for leadership in these moments. Obviously, they're a little bit light on actual like Super Bowl winning guys. Like you look at this roster, you're not really going to be able to find anybody that has like big playoff experience and Super Bowl rings. In fact, they might not have anybody on this team that has won a Super Bowl before now that I look at it. But this is a team that has been here before. Their coach has been here before, and they are bringing a certain level of gravitas to the table here. And they're not going to be satisfied with just making the playoffs, especially with where they were a month ago when they were 9-3-1. This team has higher aspirations. Reason number two why it might be a little bit intimidating to play this Packers team in the playoffs, the divisional round, which is, by the way, the only round we can play them. We can't play them in the NFC title game because they're the 7 seed. Lack of experience against Matt LaFleur. So I looked it up. The 2 years McDonald was the defensive coordinator in Green Bay, or Baltimore, excuse me. He was a DC for 2 years in Baltimore. They did not play the Packers during that 2-year span. And the one time that he coached against Green Bay was last year in Seattle, and LaFleur kind of got him. LaFleur got him pretty darn good. I remember this game. It was a very hyped primetime game. We were excited. We were riding a 4-game win streak, and it was 14-0 instantly. Like we blinked and it was 14-0 Green Bay. And watching that game, I definitely felt like LaFleur just had McDonald coming and going. They ran the ball fairly effectively. Love was very efficient. I don't think they had any turnovers. Maybe they had a fumble, but it was not a good game by the Seattle defense at all. And this is the only time that McDonald has coached against LaFleur. So if you want to look at the little bit of evidence that we have, there might be a little bit of a matchup in favor of LaFleur there. I don't want to go too far with that. We didn't have the roster that we have now. Byron Murphy's a much better player. We have Nwosu now. We have DeMarcus Lawrence now. We have, Ty Okada is providing a lot more than he was providing back then. et cetera, et cetera. And remember this, I remember this game also being one of the really bad Reek Woolen games. Reek Woolen's very locked in now, so there should be a different result this time around in comparison. So I'm not overly worried about this element, but unlike Shanahan, unlike Canales, and unlike even occasionally McVay, we have no evidence of McDonald being able to just dominate LaFleur's offense. I think he can, because the LaFleur offense is ultimately an offshoot of the Shanahan offense, but it hasn't happened yet. And the final reason kind of ties into the reason that I just gave, but the last reason I would be a little bit concerned about playing this Green Bay team would be number one, Matt LaFleur's competency as a coach. I think that he is a good coach, and I think he's very good at putting together an offensive game plan. I think there's a lot of positive things that he brings to the table as a coordinator and a play caller on top of his head coaching ability. But there's also a little element here of Matt LaFleur and maybe some other people involved in that Green Bay organization coaching for their job. Now, this is mainly something I'm thinking about for this weekend when they play the Bears, but it's also valid to consider when they play us in the divisional round if they win. Matt LaFleur might get fired this offseason if they do not advance to a certain point in the postseason. And this article on Lombardi Avenue talks a little bit about how his job security has not been what you would have expected. And that if they do not break through here, if they do not make a satisfactory playoff run, he could get let go. And there would be other coaches on that staff that could get let go. Maybe their GM gets let go. He did make the Micah Parsons trade, and that's looking like that's not really going to work out too well. I don't know if that's his fault, but sometimes stuff happens anyway. So there is an element here of these guys are going to be especially desperate. I would suspect that if Green Bay beats Chicago this weekend and then loses to Seattle in the divisional round, that's going to buy LaFleur another year at least. But for whatever it's worth, he only has 1 year left on his deal. You very rarely see a coach in their dead man walking year. So there would be a choice between extending him, letting him go, or having him coach in the final year of a contract, which is a little bit of an awkward spot when he's gotten the 7 seed 3 years in a row. So it's possible, I think it's very possible that LaFleur ends up being someone that is looked at as a surprise firing, even if they beat the Bears. And maybe that's going to be something that really drives him to hook up something that a less desperate coach would not. Like, there's no concern about the Panthers firing Dave Canales. The Rams are not going to fire Sean McVay, but there's a real possibility that LaFleur's coaching for his job, and that could drive him to do something a little over the top compared to what we've seen all year. Maybe. I don't think this is a huge factor, but either way, I think LaFleur's good. He is a guy who can come up with a game plan to mitigate their lack of talent offensively, and it wouldn't shock me if he did it again. Overall, I feel really good about this matchup because I don't think the Packers defense can really stop much of anything without Parsons. And I'm really looking at that Baltimore game they played a couple weeks ago where they gave up 300 yards rushing. And I think to myself, Seattle should be able to run the ball on Green Bay the same way that the Ravens did. Obviously, it's a little different, but remember, Lamar Jackson did not play in that Ravens game. That was Tyler Huntley. So it's not like it was all Lamar running around out there. In fact, it was 0% Lamar. They just couldn't stop Derrick Henry at all. And obviously, Baltimore, they might be the best rushing team in football. They're up there, but Seattle is playing at about that level in recent weeks, too. They run the ball for almost 500 yards combined over their last 2 games. All right, so that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Overall, I think the Packers would be a perfectly acceptable opponent. I would have a lot of confidence that we beat them, but there are some mitigating factors here. There are some really tricky elements to this that I don't think exist with an opponent like, say, the Panthers or maybe even the 49ers at this point. Jordan Love is capable of shocking you with a big performance. There are some things going on that you have to be careful of. And they might be desperate. Well, I don't know exactly what's going on behind closed doors there, but maybe. So that concludes this little series. Let me know what you think. See you guys later. Go Hawks.